Well, hello everyone, and here we are again, and we're almost done with the 1st century AD, which is the early empire, but we haven't left it quite yet. Last time we talked about the 1st century emperors, and today we will talk about just the life of regular people, for the most part, rich and less rich. And we'll talk about their lives and we'll talk about their deaths. And for that we're going right here back to the area around Pompeii. We're going back to Vesuvius, we're going back to the Bay of Naples, because that's where housing survived the best. You've seen this slide before, here it is again, Mount Vesuvius. We will be looking at Pompeii, of course, and we'll also be looking at another town called Herculenium, right here. And Herculaneum was a wealthier town. Herculaneum was, if Pompeii is Miami, South Beach, then Herculaneum is Palm Spring, this sort of thing. And had a number of stunning villas. It's called Herculaneum or Ercolano, is named after the mythical founder of the city, Hercules, and that's where the name comes from. And it's a wealthier town than Pompeii, with extraordinary number of finely decorated houses. The ancient tradition connected the town with the Greek hero Heracles as an indication of the city origin. This is, of course, recreation, but even in recreation you already see all these colonnaded gardens. Alas, this is what it looks like today. There are modern dwellings around, of course. It's still, well, Pompeii is still not entirely excavated, of course, but Herculaneum even less so, because while Pompeii was buried under about 13 feet of ash, which compressed, of course, and became hard, Herculaneum actually was buried under around 70 feet of not only ash and tufa, but also mud, superheated mud that flowed from Vesuvius and then with time, of course, petrified. So it was a lot more difficult to excavate, and still is, Herculaneum than it is to excavate Pompeii. And not only that, but in the lacunae inside that, the petrified rock, essentially petrified mud, in the lacunae, the gas could not escape. So, and as a result, during excavation, it's the additional danger is to encounter those lacunae, puncture them, and then the gas can escape, and it's dangerous to one's health, not to mention one's life. But a bit of it is excavated, and we'll be looking at what we have. Well, one is the so-called House of the Mosaic, right here, and it was an aristocratic residence, very scenic position, and it's built, as you see, on top of the old fortification walls, but as the ground rose, so this became possible, and the terrace here is overlooking the sea. And again, we must, as ever, imagine all of this in beautiful condition with a lot of color, with red tile roofs, stunning. The Mosaic House, the reason it's called that is because there are these beautiful mosaics on the floor, and this is a fauces, this is the entrance hall, and as you see, there are floral and geometric patterns here. What you see as a swastika, I know our mentality rebels against it because of the events of the Second World War, but on the historical level we must remember that it's a very ancient symbol of a sun. So when you see these, swastika-looking geometric designs, don't immediately get horrified. It's just that at the time it was a very popular design. And the Greeks used it, the Romans used it, of course. And yes, of course, because of its power and its value for its expression. In fact, the Nazis used it as well, and of course they corrupted it entirely for all time. But well, here is the entrance, the fosses. You can see that the floor in the atrium is buckled, and that of course is because of all the heat and all the mud that flowed into the place. Here's the plan. And it's very interesting, this plan, because the axis that we're used to is right here. This is the fosses that we just looked at, right there. One walked in, then the atrium, we are all used to that, and then this is the place of tablinum that actually was used as a dining room. And then the rest of the house, instead of being a continuation of this axis, the rest of the house is turned perpendicular to the first axis. And as you see from the atrium, one then walked into a peristyle garden, a beautiful garden. Then there's an exedra here, our aloe. And so, as you know, in Herculenium perhaps there was a little more space, more money, so one could play now with arrangements. So there's another axis here that's perpendicular to the first, and then from here, then a large dining room was right next to the terrace. So if you have many guests, everybody could be looking at the gorgeous seascape, and then various extraneous cubiculums, rooms that were used for, of course, for bedrooms, for kitchens, for what have you. We are just only looking at this part, whereas the house grew and grew and grew. But this part, as you see, is a little untraditional in the sense of having two axes instead of one. And so as we go from the, as I said, from the entrance hall into the atrium. So this is the entrance hall. We go into the atrium, and here it is. So you walked in. This is our first axis right there. We walked in. More mosaic, black and white mosaic, very beautiful. And then this is what would be a tablinum in a regular house. But what they used it seems, they used it as a small dining room. And it's interesting. As you see, it has columns. It's like a little basilica. So it has the main nave, as we would say, and then on each side there are a couple of aisles right there. Perhaps musicians could sit there while the people dined. So there it is, we're walking right there. And here it is. So this is our nave, and what appears to be a third style decoration. Frescoes on the wall, and on each side you would have those side aisles. And yes, one could have musicians on each side, and here in stereo. It could be quite lovely. It's called a rare example of oikos Egyptus, an Egyptian dining room. And it's based on Vitruvius's description. Given its position and place of the tablinum, it must have been used as a public reception area, deliberately evoking the public setting of the basilica. So it could be either. As we use rooms for different purposes, I mean, they could use the same room, of course, for different purposes. And here we are. So in their culina, they had a kitchen right there, and still, and you can see the stairs going up. So the house had a second floor as well. And this is our tablinum. And then from here, from the atrium, then they would turn 90 degrees and go into a beautiful, beautiful peristyle garden, and then from here you'd have an exedra, and then as I said, just satellite rooms that could be used as bedrooms or what have you, and then straight into triclinium, which is a dining room. So that's the House of the Mosaic, and again, the reason it is called so is because of its beautiful floors, and the mosaic floors, in fact. The next house we'll look is the so-called House of Neptune and Amphitrite. And Amphitrite, according to mythology, was playing with her friends, the Nereids, and Neptune, who's the god of the oceans, saw her, fell in love with her, and of course abducted her, but made her his wife. This house actually has more of a standard layout. And as you see, one walks through the fosses right here, satellite rooms on each side. There's a small serving room right here, a service room. And then on the north side, that's the service room. And then the fosses leads to a very large atrium. And it has the kind of a large, also marble impluvium, that little space that catches water. Then at the rear of the atrium is a relatively small tablinum. This is our tablinum right here, which overlooks, and that's the most important thing about the house, it overlooks a gorgeous, however small, little garden, but it's beautifully appointed. It's a little court with a nymphaeum and a mosaic decoration on the wall. And this is why it's called the House of Neptune and Amphitrite. And then various rooms, again, serve various purposes. This is our mosaic. This is what one finds, the little court in the back. Nymphaeum is usually a water arrangement, a sculptural arrangement of fountains. Now, by now, you see, this is the 1st century, and AD, by now, Egypt is very much part of the Roman Empire, and everybody's fascinated with the Nile and the great rivers and the Egyptian love for fountains, and so fountains and using water for decoration inside the house has become quite popular. So this is so here it is, and this is what remains there. There was a fountain here, and perhaps statues in these niches. Then beautiful mosaics with mythological scenes. And here is a stunning mosaic with Neptune and Amphitrite. There were also theatrical masks, you see, the 1, 2, and 3, they're theatrical masks, and there's another mask up there. And so theater became important, and we saw one of the houses in Rome that actually had masks painted on the walls. And here there were the actual masks, carved masks. And then this is the central mosaic. And then people would sit around here on around this dais, and then the entertainment would be going on in this area. Servants would be bringing food and what have you. These are the masks. This is head of Silenus, who was a teacher of Bacchus, so to speak. So both of them, Silenus and Bacchus, they're both identified with theater, with wine, with entertainment, with bacchanalia, with all things of the flesh that are very, very pleasant. And one of 2 theatrical marble masks. Here is one of the mosaics, and here is a close-up of the mosaic, of the large mosaic. So here is Amphitrite, and Neptune is a bit behind. And as you see, Amphitrite is based on Aphrodite of Cnidos, and Neptune is based on our Derivers. And then there are many shells that frame the mosaic. The shells serve as a frame, and everything else is mosaic. It's glass tessera, colored, polychrome, in polychrome, glass tessera. Very lovely. So you can just imagine with the water behind you and sitting around this area and being served lovely dishes and music, perhaps singing, talking about Greek mythology, talking about literature, philosophy. Must have been a lovely life. The next house is the house of a large fountain. We're going to Pompeii now. From Herculenium, we're going to Pompeii, which is about 5 miles or so. And this was the large fountain. Here is a bit of a traditional, again, arrangement we walk into the fosses, then impluvium is here, and then right from here, so this would be a dining room R, so that people could sit again in the dining room and overlook this beautiful, this was actually a garden with a fountain, and it's larger than the one before. As one walks into the house, one actually sees the fountain directly. And here it is. This is the fountain itself. It has a pediment. It consists of a pediment and then set around a niche, the whole niche here. Then there's an opening in the niche right there, and this is where the water jetted out. And as it jetted out, it went down the beautiful steps right here, and that would be statuary everywhere. Decoration consisted of masks, tragic masks, theatrical masks, lots of sculpture. They actually found a bronze statue, since removed, of a little Cupid with a dolphin, set on a circular stand right there. Here you can see how intricate the mosaic is and how beautiful it is. And these are the statues, and from everywhere here, the water jetted out. This is the opening, the main opening, from where it fell onto the steps and went down the steps. But then from the masks, as you see, these are also fountains. Another picture of the same. So here, these masks, the water jetted out of there as well. And then you can just imagine how beautiful this was. Now, one doesn't actually have to imagine this one, because a very wealthy man with exquisite taste by the name of John Paul Getty, he built a copy of one of the villas in Herculenium. We'll look at that villa. It's called the Villa of the Papyri, and that became his first museum. The Ghetto Museum in Malibu, in California, that is essentially a copy of a spectacular villa in Herculaneum. And in that villa, he actually recreated the large fountain from Pompeii. And you see it right here, untouched, with the masks, with the fountain. It's a complete, stunning, beautiful recreation. He consulted scholars, archaeologists, everybody. Not only, and in that villa, he also recreated the bronze statuary. That it's really extraordinary. So this is what it looks like, right there. It's not a computer recreation. It's a real thing. It's called the East Garden, and as you walk into that garden, it's water, water, water. Because in the middle there's the fountain with the sculpted bronze civet cats right there, and those are all fountains, of course. And then behind is our large fountain from Pompeii. It's really very remarkable space, and just one feels so tranquil and beautiful. And of course, the sound of water is very calming. And then there's a house of a small fountain, also in Pompeii. So as you see, fountains were becoming really, really important. Water was becoming important. And it's the same thing. So this is a very direct access from here. And again, you see the fountain. It's a little smaller, and then various satellite rooms. And the fountain is smaller, but the same idea. It's a pedimented structure, the pedimented structure that frames an arch, and then inside the arch, everything covered with mosaic, and inside the arch there is a fountain. And here it is, you can see it. And of course, with sculpture everywhere on each side, and the fountain would be right there. Now, this is really an amazing house, and also in Pompeii. And it's called, it's known either as a house of Laurius Tiburtinus, or it also is known as a house of Octavius Quarto, and it's possible that the house belonged to both of them, and as a result we have two names. This is where the original owner made a very specific choice of having a small house but a huge garden. Here's the map of Pompeii. You may remember it from the first lecture, second lecture. Now the Pompeii, the Samnite, the ancient Pompeii before the Romans came, began right here, and this is where our forum, this is where our forum is located. And as you see, as a result, because it was growing organically, it's not as rectilinear as it will be later when the Romans will take over. Then it began to grow this way, and you can see how the perpendicularity is beginning to develop. And this is, in fact, is our house of Veti, right there. And then it began to grow this way, away from the center of the city, and this is where the Romans built their amphitheater and palaestra. Palaestra is where athletes exercise. And our house of Octavius Porta is one of these, in fact, because there was more space. Here it was very, very congested in the center of Pompeii. But the more you go away from the center, as in every city, the more space there is. So this man was in fact able to purchase the entire insula. And as a result, you see, it's basically the same thing. I mean, there's the entrance, so this is our direct access, and the house is really not that large. And not only it's not that large, but they even rented the two front rooms to shops right here. And an interesting feature in many tabernae is attaching stone benches to the wall of the tabernae, so that people could sit there, so they wouldn't just have to rush, but they would sit, they would talk, they would buy some more, obviously, to eat, and chat. So here we still have, in fact, the seating. But the house itself is very small, as you see. Here's the fosses, smallish peristyle, the adjoining rooms, small tablinum, but that's where marvel begins, because what the house has is two waterways. So as I said, River Nile, remember, this is an imitation of the River Nile, just having your own beautiful river to yourself. But they have two waterways. One waterway goes right here. It's parallel to the wall of the house, right here. And then the large one goes through the entire garden. So there's the house. Here it is. This is the columnated garden, the small one. And then it goes out, and there is the so-called pergola. The pergola is just the beautiful walkway, a shaded, beautiful walkway. And then all of this then overlooks this incredible garden. And archaeologists and botanists, scientists, scholars found the roots of the trees. They know exactly what was planted there. And the whole place, in fact, there are trees now as well, because they've been planted since the discovery of the house. But it was obviously a beautiful, beautiful shaded park, not so much a garden as a park. And along the park then flowed the river. And then one could actually exit onto the next street. So there's one street here, as you see, and another street right here. So the entire block he purchased. Let's see. The waterway itself, our Nile was stocked with fish, and with fresh fish, so they could have fresh fish for dinner anytime. And was lined up with all sorts of gorgeous statuary. And then there was statuary along the pergola as well. I mean, everything was decorated in the most extraordinary way. So there's our house right here. And I mean, it's interesting the way they did it, because you see this area, I mean, they purchased the block, but clearly there was somebody already there. Because here, this is somebody else's house, right there, and they're not allowed in that garden, because this property belongs to this house. This is our River Nile. This is the pergola, you see the blue, and this is our River Nile, and this is the pergola. You're looking at the pergola, and at the end of the pergola, as you see, is a little pedimented, shaded area where there'd be another fountain, of course, and beautiful statuary and mosaics. These are frescoes. These are not mosaics. These are mythological frescoes. This looks like Narcissus actually sitting there staring at himself in the water, and that's how he will die. There'd be statuary here, of course, more beautiful decoration, and the water flowing. So that's the pergola, and then from the pergola you're looking that way now. You're looking perpendicular to the house, and that's what you will see. This was all beautiful river, just this structure flowing and filled with the fish and statuary on every side, and then in the middle you would have different structures, and they themselves will be either little temples or a hideaway for more statuary. Along the canal, right there along our Nile, is a Tetra style temple right there. Tetra style, remember, that sits on 4 columns. Tetra style temple and nymphaeum dedicated to Diana and Actaeon, a monumental fountain and a small pond. So even within the canal there is there's a pond there. It's just must be just hard to imagine what it must have looked like. And these people intentionally sacrificed space to have that. This was more important. And thus we arrive at the house that I mentioned before, the John Paul Getty house. And we don't have to imagine it, because it actually exists. Even though it doesn't exist, it exists in Herculenium, but it hasn't been excavated. In the 18th century, the workers were drilling for foundations, for whatever they were drilling, and they came across some ancient ruins, and that's when one became aware of a house underneath. That's when it all began. But because it is so deep, as I said, it's really more mining than excavating. In Pompeii you excavate, in Herculaneum you mine. So they mined the tunnels, and then the tunnels at the depth of 70 feet, and then the tunnels alongside the house. So Gachidela, copy of the Villa of the Papyri in Herculaneum, a museum dedicated to the study of the arts and cultures of ancient Greece, Rome, and Etruria. And as you see now, in this case the house is very large. It's quite large, and it was large in Herculaneum. And then it had this spectacular canal again, well, lake, a very long lake, and here it even had a small theater, or at least in Malibu, and performances take place there on a regular basis. Virtual model of the Villa of the Papyri, and the reason it's called the Villa of the Papyris because this entire space right here is a library. This satellite wing, it's all a library, and it was filled with papyri, with writings of Greek and Roman philosophers, and that in itself was a tremendous find. And then from the villa, a road left to a spot with this spectacular view, and that was called Belvedere. The lighter areas are areas known from the 18th century, and that's this. And then the little sort of beige area revealed during the new excavations, and these are here. And then the darker area reconstructed. The darker areas are reconstructed. This talks about the reconstruction of the villa and the Getty Villa in California. So in '74, it was open to the public. It is a proportional reconstruction of the Villa of the Papyri. It illustrates the original grandeur of the villa, as well, of course, as allowing the visitor to be part of an actual spectacular aristocratic Roman villa, as it would have been in the 1st century AD, before the eruption of 79. And the reconstruction is supported by the original as well as numerous written and archaeological sources. We're now looking at the Getty Villa, and all the sculptures you see, they all have been, the sculpture itself is in the Archaeological Museum in Naples. But what Goethe did was commission exact copies, and what we see here are the copies. And this is the central fountain, and then behind is the villa itself. And this is more. There's the inner peristyle, as you see. It's in the center of the museum, and this too has a narrow central pool. And then the replica of all these women right there. They're market women. They're bronze sculptures of market women as they come to the market, as they come to the city fountain to bring water to the house. Supposedly these are well, as close as a copy can be to the original. But these are the market women that came to draw water from the stream. These are just some more pictures to give you an idea of what this is. And I imagine what with the almost the end of the first century and their love for color, the original villa was probably even more colorful than the Ghetto Museum. Here's more. I mean, everything is quite spectacular. It's wonderful to have money and taste combined together. And there's a coffered ceiling, and with the gilded bronze rosettes. And here you can see it as the bird flies. There's our pool, and the villa is here, and it is quite large. As I said, it's not like the other villa where sacrifice was made for the sake of the fountain. Peristyle surrounds the formal garden and leads one past illusionistic wall paintings to the brilliant view of the Pacific Ocean. It's adorned with hedge-lined pathways, circular stone benches, plants, and they researched the plants that were in fact favored by the Romans, and these plants are planted there. And here bay laurel, boxwood, myrtle, ivy, oleander, they're all planted. And it's an extremely popular museum, as you can imagine. It's so beautiful. And then the climate, of course, is spectacular. And so all these plants can, in fact, grow there because the climate is very similar and around the year. And then the bronze sculptures, replicas of statues found in the villa, are placed in their ancient find places. Exactly where they were found, that's where they were placed. There's also a little herb garden with fruit trees, fragrant and colorful perennials, used by the Romans in their cooking, in their ceremony, medicine, and a small pool of water lilies, and just Claude Monet is missing, but otherwise all the necessities are there. Carl Weber left a detailed description of the finding, and he's the one who talks about how dangerous the excavations were, and how many times he in fact risked his life being lowered into those shafts, and God forbid piercing a stone where gas would be trapped, and then in fact suffocating with gas. We know his name, but we also know that he did not receive either promotion or recognition for his pains, unfortunately. But this was in the middle of the 18th century. You see, the well diggers came across what turned out to be the Belvedere. Belvedere is this. Belvedere means Belvedere, a scenic pathway. That's what that is. And this is what they found right here. And then step by step they came to the villa itself. For 6 years, the remains of the building were explored by tunneling operations after the supervision of Carl Weber. And he made what was really revolutionary in his technique. He made a very detailed plan of the villa, and the conditions, they didn't have flashlights at that time, so they had to be working with torches. So the conditions must have been horrible, and God forbid torches, that's direct flame, and if the gases escaped, that would not be good. But he also, whatever he found, whatever he removed, he also marked the exact find place for the objects, and that was revolutionary. Made detailed plans and was well ahead of his time in what he had done. As I said, this entire space right here is the library, and that they found later. Something that's that everybody was very happy about, of course, was finding this bronze head of the Derivers. I mean, it's obviously a copy of the original, but in fact it seems to be a copy that was made from either the original or an incredibly good copy of the original, because it's very sensitive. It's extremely well done, much better than the face on this on the marble sculpture. And this must have been the top of a herm. Now, a herm in the Greek and Roman sculpture, it's a vertical stone block, essentially, that could mark. It could mark various places. It could mark the crossroads, milestone, and it was usually a stone block with a face. Originally, it was the face of the god Hermes or Mercury, and that's why it's called a herm, H-E-R-M or H-E-R-M-A, both of them. It's both singular. So the god Hermes was at first represented and gave his name to the sculptural type, but then any face, any head, but usually male. Usually male, because they also like to attach the genitals to the stone block. And no, that was just to cast away the evil eye. So that's what this was. It was the same thing as wearing a phallus like trinket on your necklace. So so there were rural markers which were also supposed to ensure the fertility of the herds and flocks and to bring luck. They were erected, as I said, boundaries, crossroads, gymnasia. I mean, they could be erected anywhere. They could be erected in front of a house if the house felt that they needed a little more luck and they needed to guard themselves against evil spirits. So herms were very, very, very common. So that's what a herm is right here. This one does have the genitals. And presumably this head of the Derivers was also part of a herm. The villa was clearly dedicated to the study of philosophy. So whoever was the owner of the villa was the lover of philosophy, because that entire library was filled with philosophical works, and whether Greek or Roman, and there were a lot of busts of ancient philosophers. We're not sure who they are, and there's Getty images. Busts of philosophers: Aristotle, Democritus, Epicurus, Philodemus, Lucretius. I mean, they could be any of them, because the works of all of them were found in the villa. And here you can see, in the again in the middle of the 18th century, there was this. They called it an astonishing find, and it was an astonishing find because I mean, so many ancient texts are lost, and then suddenly they come across a room that had shelves and shelves and crates, and they were stacked with scrolls. And at first they really didn't understand what they were, because scrolls was not really the right word, because what they found was a collection of just blackened cylinders that certainly could not be unrolled. Once they realized from broken fragments that they were in fact scrolls, they attempted to read them, but a lot were destroyed. All attempts to read the papyri, altogether 1,800 scrolls were recovered, resulted in the destruction of the documents, until one Antonio Piaggio, who was a priest in the Vatican Library, who created a mechanical unroller. His process was extremely slow, but it did allow the documents to be read. And Lucretius's, yes, on the nature of things was among the scrolls, which is one of the most important and extraordinary works of of antiquity. Didn't you tell me that now they can read the scrolls like this?
There's a new method in archaeology that's being used. It's an X-ray method. It's basically like putting the scroll for a CAT scan.
And they can unroll it.
Well, they don't.
Right?
No, they don't.
Not unroll physically, but unroll it.
They scan the depths of the scroll layer by layer by layer, and then the computer will unroll it digitally online. Right. The scroll itself will remain entirely intact, never to be touched. This is the preferred method now too. And there's the kind of the hope that eventually it can be used to see through walls or floor, to be able to at least assess if there are more chambers, what is in those chambers in the future, in the hopes. It's kind of so much of archaeology is about recognizing that we are limited by our time. So, for example, there are the excavations going off the coast of Egypt, where they found something like 92 sunken boats off of the coast of Alexandria, and they have chosen to excavate, I think it's 2 or 3. And they're leaving the other 90 alone because in the confidence that future generations
will have better methods.
So while it's important to learn from 1 or 2 now, by virtue of excavating, there's always the risk of destroying what you excavate.
Well, yes. Here's
but now it's become a lot more careful. Like if you can't,
don't touch. You can't do it. Don't touch.
Now the method is not I need to know. Now the method is I need to know what I can, but it's much more important for history. If I never know what's in this boat, someday my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, some other archaeologist will come here with better tools, and they'll preserve it for all of posterity.
Exactly. Yeah, because
very different mentality about archaeology.
Yeah, because
today.
the Dead Sea Scrolls also they have the same problem in reading the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah. Well, here it is, and as I said, this is where the library was. It was all part. But as you see, the house itself was quite large. So unlike the other villa with the long pool, here it is. Here was the library. Here's the house and the library. This is some of the sculpture. These are the originals. There's the wrestlers. They say after Lysippus. I mean, they hope, of course, that they were made by a great sculptor of the 4th century, Lysippus, who specialized in athletes. But this is in Naples, and these are the actual figures that were excavated in the villa of the Papyri. The faces are very, very striking. The eyes, as you see, here's another one. That for instance, villa of the Papyri, and the way the eyes were done, ivory and glass were glued in from the inside. And what happened with this particular figure is that the heat from the volcanic debris partially melted the glass, and as such we don't have the perfect eyes as here. So here clearly they survive. So that villa of the Papyri is really extraordinary, and if you find yourself in California, by all means Malibu near Los Angeles, and you'll actually find yourself inside a spectacular Roman villa. The 3rd style painting, I know we already looked at it, but this is just to confirm further. When we first look at it, and this is the house of a fruit orchard in Pompeii. When we first look at it, we are reminded of the 2nd style fresco in the garden of Livia's house near Rome. But it's not actually, because you see in Livia's house you can literally walk into the garden. It's as if you're kind of stepping over one fence and then going to the wall, and you can see the garden all around you because it surrounds all walls. Whereas here is not the case. What they did, they apparently the 3rd style is now all the rage, so they separate. And the first layer is all 3rd style. It's this very delicate geometric design. And then we see the second part, which is similar, which is similar to the trellised little wall of Livia's garden, but it's separate, nevertheless. It's completely separate. And then the garden itself is also separate. In fact, it almost looks like a screen, you know, the tripartite screen with the tree in the middle, and then these parts on the sides. They could almost be folded over. And while if we just looked at the painting itself, it could appear to be a second style. When you look at the wall in general, it's not. But there's a snake. I mean, it looks just like the our apple tree from the Garden of Paradise, together with the snake. So third style painting, second style painting, and this, remember, I showed it to you as an example again of third style painting. Even now here, particularly when with very large parts, like the one that's cut off. It's unclear whether they want to create the impression of a panel hanging on the wall, or they are more inclined to a second style where they want to dissolve the wall. But this actually is so third. This is actually the fourth style, because anytime when you see cut-off architecture, not finished, literally a building could be cut in the middle. So that's fourth style, but parts of it look like third style right here. And we're back to the House of the Vetti that you saw before, and here this looks like the third style. It's very, very beautiful, with all these very delicate, elegant designs. The Ixion room also in the House of the Vetti, and that's the fourth style. So we discussed them before, and here too there's cut-off architecture. Then there are these people standing on the ledge, literally making a wrong step and falling into our space. So all of that is fourth style. Here it is, and here's the recreation of the style. You saw this as well. It actually is part of a fourth style ensemble on its own. It looks like second style because it's so naturalistic, and using the trick of the steps. So the top of the painting and the bottom of the painting compositionally are equally important. The painter obviously is trying to show us how well he is skilled at reflection, or reflection of light, or refraction, or cast shadows, any of these. And it has, I mean, the design is simple, bold design, sort of modern artish design, and the composition is beautiful. So the branch with the are they peaches? They're peaches, still life with peaches. The branch extends onto the second step, and the painter very much underlines the cast shadow, where it falls, how it reacts. So this is a baker, Terentius Neo, and his wife, and they're shown not only as good Romans, but they're also shown as quite literate, because both of them are holding scroll. He is holding a scroll, and she is holding a tablet with a stylus. And there's a sign there. That's why we know that he's a baker, and his name. This is another example of the fourth style, and you can see how it was found. It's called the House of Menander, and it's on the wall right here. It's referred to the House of Menander because of this fresco. He's sitting in front of his lectern and either dictating something to a slave who is not in the picture, or reading it. And on the lectern, on the codex that rests on the lectern, there is a name, Menander, so that's where the name came from. But some speculate that the painting is not actually of Menander himself, but rather of the owner of the house, who is reading works by Menander. But as I said, legible is the name of Menander, identifying him who was the first to write new comedy. He introduced new comedy in Greece. And they called this fourth style, I don't know why it is a fourth style. There must be something around. I would rather call it almost the second style. Illuminated manuscripts also existed towards the end of the empire, however. No, they were introduced already in the 1st century AD because parchment slowly but surely began to replace the scrolls, and parchment or vellum, depending which animal you use, either it's lamb or pig or what have you, specially treated skin, and of course it is a lot more durable. But then in this case you cannot, and also the scrolls could be difficult because, I mean, if there's, say, even 30 feet of a scroll, you have to unroll the whole thing for referencing. Whereas with the codexes, with just separate sheets, it's much easier. And the books were, a number of books were illustrated, not all of them, but some of them were. And the oldest manuscript that we do have, illustrated manuscript, is called Vatican Virgil, which is late. This one is late antique illuminated manuscript, and it comes to us from the year 400 AD. Virgil, you remember, he lived at the time of Augustus, but this is the oldest we have. It's written in specific, very beautiful classical script, and the words were not separated, and that's what you see here. Usually full editions of Virgil would always include the Aeneid, but here we have parts of the Aeneid and then parts of Georgics, and that's his writing on the pleasures of living rural life, and that's what Georgics are about. Here is Virgil. He comes to the countryside, and the Romans loved writing about it, and the Romans loved their country villas because they very much felt that in the countryside they were much closer to nature and to understanding the truths of life. And so here's Virgil. He comes to a friend of his who is a farmer. He is originally, it's called the Carucus page because he's originally from Carucus in Asia Minor. And here's the farmer himself, and in the background is his kind of humble abode. And he is talking to two farmheads and Virgil himself, who is disguised as a farmhead. And that he talks about the pleasures of life in the countryside, and how true one becomes to himself, and how honest one's surrounded by nature and by the miracles and the sincerity of nature. And that was a very, very popular topic in Rome. So Georgics, that's about that. So that's the manuscript. I just wanted to finish off the painting styles. So they did have illuminated manuscripts as well. There are a number of sources online where you can see a video of a reconstructed Pompeian villa, and this is just one of the stills from a video. So if you're interested, you can just push a button and go around the Pompeian villa.